One of the first questions we get asked anytime we talk about being an expat is, why did we choose Hong Kong? Why, out of all the countries in the world, did we choose Hong Kong to move abroad to? So today on this episode of This Expat Life, we're going to look at not only why we chose Hong Kong, but the questions you need to ask yourself before you choose a country. Before you choose a country. But what questions you need to ask yourself before you choose a country to move to? And at This Indulgent Life, I help you navigate parenting, education, and creating your extraordinary life. Moving abroad is a big deal, and your first real job and all that entails can be so daunting. But when you have a family, the decision can become even more complicated. So here are 6 questions that we asked ourselves before moving to Hong Kong, and the thought process in choosing Hong Kong as our destination. Have you ever thought of living abroad? Let me know your dream destination in the comments below. The first question you need to ask yourself is, why do I want to move abroad? It could be anything. Is it because you want adventure, you want to pay off some student loans, or save up some money? Do you want a certain type of job, or is there a certain country that you just always wanted to live in? Knowing your motivation will help you narrow down your options. For us, we wanted some adventure and to not struggle so much financially. So we looked at some countries that were known to have good salaries. Last we looked, the countries that were paying the best were countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, South Korea, and Hong Kong. You can sometimes also find really good jobs for good pay in China, Taiwan, Singapore, and Macau. The second question was, what kind of job do you want, or what can you do? So are you a pilot, a banker, a businessman, a teacher? Are you good at marketing, engineering, or even an architect? These are the most popular jobs that you can find as an expat abroad. But they aren't your only options. I know one friend who's in winemaking, and he has a job here in Hong Kong. So there are lots of options. Just be creative in your search. And of course, if you have a degree in anything, you can actually teach English abroad. They typically just want to make sure that you have a college diploma, a degree. Usually it has to be at least a bachelor's, a 4-year degree. And then you can teach English as a second language in almost all of these countries, if not all of these countries. For me, I'm a teacher. I'm actually dual certified elementary education and art education. At first, I was open to teaching English as a second language, elementary education, or art. But as I dived deeper into the interview process and looking for jobs and narrowing down my countries of choice, I realized that if I was going to be doing this, I wanted the job that I had been after, which is an art teacher. And an art teacher job back home is super difficult to come by. It's a little easier out here because turnover is so high. So that's what I decided to be. This helped narrow down my search results, but also was a bit limiting, as the bigger paying countries often pay well for people to teach English. Question number 3, are you single or married? And is your spouse going to work or stay home? If you're single, obviously you have no one else to worry about but yourself. But in some countries like Saudi Arabia, you will have some limitations if you're a single woman. However, if you're married and your spouse wants to work, then they need to be able to get their own job before leaving, like teaching couples, where they would hire both of you to teach in a school. Or you need to choose a country that allows your spouse to work on a dependent visa. And Hong Kong was that for us. While my husband could and has just been a stay-at-home husband, he's often wanted to work or own his own business. However, he doesn't have a college degree or the qualifications in any area that expats typically are hired for here or elsewhere. So we needed to make sure that the country we went to allowed him to have a dependent visa that allowed him to work. That eliminated quite a few countries, but since the laws change often, I'm not sure what they are now. But Hong Kong does allow a spouse to own a business or work. It also allows you, as the visa holder, to have multiple jobs as long as your job allows. So Hong Kong is very open, free market, which is perfect for those who are wanting to come and make some money. The fourth question is, do you have children? And if you do, where will they go to school if they're of school age? And if they are not, and both parents are working, who's going to take care of the kids? So if you're a teacher, often your school will give you free or reduced tuition for 1 to 2 kids. However, some are now requiring what they call a debenture. And it's basically either one lump payment or monthly payments. So for example, at my school, I think it's 20,000 Hong Kong dollars. So over or maybe it's 10,000 Hong Kong dollars. It's about 2,000 US dollars a month for this debenture, which if you're coming for money, that's a huge amount. So you really need to think about that, especially if you're coming financially strapped. I've known a teaching couple that took out a loan in order for their 3 kids to be able to go to school. If you are a business person or a... Sorry, I'm hearing my neighbors outside. Give it a second. Okay, I think they're done. If you are a businessman or businesswoman, then often your employers, or a pilot even, your employers take care of all that for you. So definitely look into your contracts when deciding what job to take, because you want something that's going to cover education. You can send your kids to public school here, but they're very, very strict, usually all in Cantonese, which can be great, but you do need to know that the system here is very much everyone does the same thing at the same time. You don't talk. So it can be difficult for a more Western minded family. If your children aren't of school age and your spouse is working, you need to be considering that daycare is often not an option in these countries. However, hiring a helper is. So like our domestic helper, Teresa, and you can check out some videos from her as well. She takes care of Boogie for us during the day so that we can work. She is also pretty amazing in that she takes care of everything else around the house too, because working days and commuting can be longer here than they would in your home country. Question number 5 that we had to consider was, do you have pets that you will bring? And the answer for us, of course, is yes. We have 2 dogs, and they're on the larger side as well, that we wanted to bring over from the US. This greatly affects your decision on where you want to move, because each country is on a classification system with basically diseases and things that the dogs might have. So the US is a class 2 country, as is Hong Kong. And that basically means that there may be some instances of rabies, but it's basically controlled. There are some places like the UK and Taiwan, or usually islands, where they are a class 1 country, and it basically means they have 0 incidences of rabies. And so they're much more stringent with what dogs and other animals can come in and out. So for us, we wanted to make sure that we went to a country that not only would we not need to have quarantine coming in, but we wouldn't need to have quarantine coming out. So if we wanted to go back out to like European country, for instance, we would be able to without quarantine. Or if we wanted to come back to the US, we wouldn't have to worry about that. If we had gone to China or South Korea or Thailand or Vietnam, or these kinds of places, they're class 3 countries, which means they do have a prevalence of rabies. And they pretty much, any class 2 or class 1 country will require you to quarantine your animal for a set amount of time, which can get expensive, as well as a little bit traumatizing for your animal and you. So that's something that you need to think about, not only the requirements. So for example, we had to have certain shots, we had to have a certain, those little ID tag things that get injected into your animal, we had a certain one of those. You have to have certain paperwork and permits, and they have, in Hong Kong, they have to fly cargo and cargo only. Excuse me. So you need to know all those requirements for the countries that you're looking at if you have pets that you want to bring. Now, if you're only planning a 1 to 2 year stint abroad and you have family that you trust with your animals, that can be an option as well. I know I had a colleague that came for 1 year last year. They just kind of wanted this 1 year experience living abroad. And that's what they did. They just had their dog stay with her mom. That's an option. But if you're like us and you're going to spend multiple years abroad, you don't want to be doing that to your animal. So really make sure that you consider these things. And when you do move abroad, if you get a pet abroad, make sure you're willing to take it back. Pets are for life. Pets are family. Okay, question number 6. Can you get by not knowing the local language? Now, of course, this can be part of the adventure and the fun, but it can also get old very fast and be very overwhelming if you can't communicate at all. So places like China and South Korea will be particularly difficult in this department if you struggle hearing languages like I do. I love languages, but I just struggle to hear the nuances. And that will probably be another video of my fun trials in learning Cantonese. So Hong Kong was great because English is one of their national languages. And so while it can be frustrating to deal with people who don't speak English very well or at all, and sometimes taxi drivers like to pretend like they can't speak any English and communicate with you, all the important stuff is in English. So my rental agreement, my contract, any taxes, government stuff, hospital stuff, all of that is in English. So at the very least, legally, you're protected and not relying on a third party to translate for you. So something to think about. But of course, it can be fun to go to a country where you can't speak the language as well. You just have to be prepared for that. So these were the questions we asked ourselves when deciding which country to focus on my job search. Of course, there may be something important to you that we did not consider, and I'd love to know what that is down in the comments below. I hope this answers your questions on why we specifically chose Hong Kong, as well as help you decide whether or not to live abroad and which country you should choose. So if that's something you're doing, again, let me know in the comments below. If you want to be inspired, if you want to be a more mindful parent, if you want to know what it takes to take that next step forward in creating your extraordinary life, then make sure to hit the subscribe button below and then hit the little bell so you get notified when new videos go up. You will receive weekly tips and inspiration on how to create your ideal life. Thank you so much for watching this episode of This Expat Life. See you next time.